Welcome to Season 4 of the Agile Brand with Greg Kihlstrom, where we discuss business agility through customer experience, employee experience, and digital transformation. I'm your host, Greg Kihlstrom. The Agile World podcast is brought to you by TEKsystems, an industry leader in full-stack technology services, talent services, and real-world application. For more information, go to teksystems.com. To read more about the topics discussed on this show, you can go to my website at gregkihlstrom.com and read my latest articles or get a copy of my latest book, Meaningful Measurement of the Customer Experience, now available on Amazon and other retailers. My name is Greg Kihlstrom, and I'm the host of the Agile Brand podcast. Welcome to a special episode of the show, brought to you by Attribution, an advanced multi-touch attribution company that empowers every marketer with the data to convert more buyers and maximize ROI. You can learn more about Attribution at www.attributionapp.com. Marketers face many challenges in their work, from continually changing consumer behavior to internal competition for resources. In order to be most effective, marketers need to be able to justify their investments of both time and resources with reliable numbers and clear ROI. Today, we're going to talk about the value of having actionable insights and attribution metrics for marketing leaders and teams so that they can clearly articulate the success of their efforts and so that they are able to clearly point to which areas are driving the most business value. To help me discuss this topic, I'd like to welcome David Hiltner, CEO of Attribution. David, welcome to the show. And for those that may have missed some of our earlier episodes, why don't you give a brief overview of what you and Attribution do?
Thanks, Greg. But first, I wanted to congratulate you on being announced as ICMI's top 25 thought leaders. So
thanks so much.
Yeah. So thanks. Well deserved.
Thank you.
So a little bit about me. I've been in digital marketing for a little over 23 years and worked at different areas. Like early on, I worked with different search engines, worked with different social media platforms, worked at two different digital ad agencies, worked at a couple startups, and more recently, I'd say like the last 7 years, I've kind of reinvented myself and started to work more towards from a digital ad agency or a digital ad world, I guess, or a digital world. Reinvented myself to doing more growth-centric, demand-generated opportunities as opposed to just lead gen, which was the early on process, I think, with digital marketing. So with those startup organizations, started to develop out better solution-oriented type of programs, campaigns, if you will. That generates higher quality opportunities from the early on, as opposed to more lead gen centric opportunities. So attribution, the great thing about that is I used attribution at most of these organizations, the platform itself. And ideally what it did was it helped me really kind of formulate better strategies and tactics in terms of how I designed and built out content and campaigns, knowing what was working, what those general growth strategies were, and then the journeys, the customer journeys, having a better understanding of what those journeys look like, allowed me to double down in the areas that were better success stories, as opposed to the ones that generally weren't necessarily working as much.
Well, yeah, and I think that's a telling testimonial that you've used the product before in past experiences, and then became CEO. Yeah. So I think that speaks a lot.
And I think that's one of the reasons why obviously I'm the CEO, the founder, knowing that, I worked with the product several times, and having used it, it seemed obviously was a natural fit for me. And I jumped at the opportunity to help lead this product because I'm a true believer in it, and have used it in successful areas. So so I'm definitely a huge believer in attribution. So
that's great. Well, yeah. So let's dive in here and start by talking about some of the challenges that marketers face. As you mentioned, you've certainly been in that role of marketing leader. I've been there as well. So I think we can both attest to the fact that there's several unique challenges, and
Yeah,
this includes higher and higher stakes from other executives and stakeholders, often with resources stretched thin,
yeah.
dependencies on other teams, legacy platforms, many other challenges. What is the what's the typical expectation of other leaders for from marketing to
Yeah.
show a return on investment?
Well, I think that the bigger is more about I think that you have dependencies throughout the entire organization and marketing. Marketing doesn't just necessarily start and begin at the top of the funnel anymore for marketers. It's the marketing is kind of goes into all areas now, which it goes into sales, it goes into product. It goes in even in engineering on some level. And so like there's an ecosystem there that the expectation now for marketers to perform at a high level is even more, I think, uh, more important for most organizations than ever before. And I think that what ends up happening is there's you know companies having a better understanding of exactly like what that customer journey looks like and what your funnel looks like, those conversion rates, having a good understanding of those KPIs is expected across, with depending if you're working with a board or if you're working with founders or if you're working with CEOs, whoever it may be. They're just as they're looking at those metrics just as much as most marketing leaders nowadays, and so it's important to really kind of be able to establish and understand what those journeys and what the funnel looks like and those conversion rates and those KPIs and be able to report on them effectively and be able to then at that point be able to illustrate confidence in your like what you're putting out there in terms of like, hey, if you're going to run a campaign, a paid campaign, what does that look like? That return on investment look like? And then also, if you're going to be using resources, and it could be anything from like content development, like so if you have like a rock star webinar that's awesome that generates a lot of great opportunities at the top of the funnel, and you work it through and it turns into a lot of revenue opportunities. Maybe you want to double down on that and be able to show and illustrate like, hey, look, we did this and we got this type of revenue from that campaign or from that content piece. And so really having a good understanding of that, and it doesn't necessarily, like I was saying before, it doesn't necessarily have to go into the paid channels. It can also go into your organic, it can go into your social, whatever it is that you're working on, or what you're investing into, whether it's with your resources. It's just as important to show a return in those areas as it is your paid campaign. So
Yeah.
I think that, like being able to illustrate that from a reporting standpoint is extremely important. And again, I think that most CEOs nowadays are so engaged in those, and the board as well are engaged in those metrics and want to have an understanding of it. Now, I also want to point out that not all campaigns are successful, right? So,
Right. Right.
and not all content that you build out is successful. Not all webinars are successful. There's certain topics that just, people don't maybe not show up as much. And so on that level, or blog pieces that aren't shared, or, white papers that aren't, you spend some time on it. So I always find that those are, finding that those KPIs and understanding like what isn't working is sometimes even more effective for me long term, just because like it allows me to pull back from those different areas. And that's again what attribution allows me to really kind of get in, understand a little bit better. And so what fails or what is failing, and having a good grasp and being able to even talk about that um, in a methodical way that allows you to like show like, hey, look, you have command and you have control over like your entire department, understand exactly like what is working, what's not, and be able to report on even what's not working, can illustrate and actually show like that you have command over what you're working on. Because not everybody, I don't think anybody expects like you to experiment and then everything to be successful and everything to be like roses at that point. It does definitely take when you're experimenting some failures to happen, and to understand like, hey, look, these numbers aren't really what we're used to. Let's pull back on that and actually put in and double down on the stuff that is working.
Yeah. Well, in doing that, I definitely agree that being able to show that ROI is important. What are some of the challenges that CMOs or other marketing leaders are facing when they're actually trying to do that? What are some of the things that get in the way of them being able to do that more effectively?
It depends on the analytics that you're looking at too. And I think what ends up happening is like, if you're following like different, like you're running different ad campaigns with certain platforms and stuff like that, you're going to get those numbers and they're going to tell you one story. And then you're going to get numbers from another analytics or a paid platform that you're using. And they're going to give you like conversion rates and all this stuff. And I think what ends up happening is like a lot of times you get this like, um, uh, I would say like false positives, as you're going through it, and meaning that you kind of think like everything's working really well here, but ultimately you're double counting at times because you think that one conversion is getting counted here and one conversion is getting counted here, and the revenue is all kind of coming in, and all of a sudden you're like, wow, we should have a lot more revenue than what we're actually getting, and so like what's happening, and so again, I think that that's what attribution does really well is that it allows you to kind of understand where in the funnel process, like whether it's the top of the funnel, middle, or bottom of the funnel, like first touch, middle touch, last touch, understanding exactly like what those campaigns are. And ultimately, I think like most marketers, um, when they're building out their campaigns, they're doing it in a way that they are segmenting it out so that there's like, hey, we're building out this content for an awareness campaign at the top of the funnel, to really drive more awareness of our product and services so that we're thought leaders in the marketplace. And then we're also building out this campaign's more middle of the funnel where people are doing research, and in the bottom of the funnel where we're designing branding campaigns so that when people are ready to buy, that when they go into a search engine, they just immediately directly put in the keyword of that brand. And so I think that that's where like a lot of marketers are starting to like, they're starting to segment out that information. But I think the hard part though of all of that is like really understanding like, hey, is this working for me or isn't it working for me? And so what they end up doing is they spend in all those areas, and then they just like, oh yeah, it's working, we think, and
Right.
so let's double down on it. And so as opposed to saying like, yeah, this, and even diving even deeper, like, because that's the cool thing about attribution as well, is that it allows you to audit every one of your customers or every one of your conversions, right? So you can go in and actually dive in and understand exactly what that journey looked like. So it allows you to say like, yeah, this generated X number of dollars for us, and so let's actually double down in those areas, and maybe this other platform that we spent time on or content piece that we built out got us a ton of leads, but none of them generated any opportunities. And that's fine too, I think, in some level, if you're trying to build awareness and maybe your expectations aren't to really drive a lot of opportunities, and you just wanted more eyeballs and you just want to bring people in. But ultimately, I think that for me, I would rather, as a marketer in today's day and age where growth is extremely important and demand is more like what you're trying to focus in on, is I'd much rather have 50 leads that generate 20 sales, as opposed to 100,000 leads that generate 30 sales, it's because like that, because
Right.
there's a lot of wasted time and effort that goes into those 100,000 leads that you're trying to figure out what's working, what's not. So that's what attribution does really well, is it allows you to like really focus in and understand exactly like what's converting and what's not. So
Yeah. So along those lines, and what you're describing is not only what your product attribution does, but also just multi-touch attribution in general. Do you mind just kind of, how would you define multi-touch attribution just for the audience listening? Because you've certainly touched on it, but I think it would help to kind of understand at that level.
one of the things that happens when people are making buying decisions, or individuals are making buying decisions, is that they don't just randomly like think in the air like, oh yeah, this is like, I saw an ad on blah 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 and now I'm just going to go and buy. In today's day and age, most individuals, before they make a purchase, they go and they do research. They, sometimes your product isn't as well known, so you do awareness plays where you're or campaigns, I should say, awareness campaigns, where you're trying to get people to understand exactly who you are, what you do in the marketplace, that there is competitors out there, and they do, so what ends up happening is, most individuals, before they make a buying decision, they end up going to, they do a lot of research. They read about you, and then when they're ready to buy, they then go and obviously purchase your product. But what multi-touch is that there's so many. You have campaigns that are running in different areas. You have content plays. You have social media. You have all of that. And so everybody, like, all of that is actually could be touching one individual, and it's helping that individual make a better buying decision. And so you want to have like all of that, like where they come back, they may give you a good example of one is like, you go to a blog piece, you read about a certain product, or you read about like something that they're solving, an issue or whatever it may be. They then, or a problem that you're having within your organization, or whatever it is, you read about it and you're like, oh, I didn't know that company existed. So then that person then goes to your website, maybe sees an ad at that point, where you're doing a retargeting ad. They leave your website, they go and they get retargeted at that point. They come back to your site, they do a little bit more research. Maybe they go to a research site, or a review site. They then read some of the reviews, and then they come back and they make a buying decision. So, well, all of those touch points were extremely important during that journey, right? So you want to understand that and understand exactly what that ecosystem or what that DNA looks like. And so having a better understanding of all of those journeys, and where what's really successful and what's not successful is super important to most marketers. And so that's what you're trying to understand. And it goes even further. It goes not only just through the funnel process once they buy, but also through the product in some cases as well. So as they purchase, then what do they do at that point? And this is where data science gets more involved in it, where the product piece of it is also a big part of like that buying experience. So you may have like a trial, or a free portion of it, of your product, and so people can then go in and actually then try out your product or service. And then at that point, having an understanding of all of those touch points is extremely important. And that's where data scientists or data science like can come in now and take that entire journey and that entire process, and then formulate different modeling for you and your organization. And so that's why I think that data science is becoming a bigger and bigger. Now, data science obviously has other areas that they build out algorithms and stuff like that within the product and stuff, and that's part of their process too. But this is where, though, I think that you get a better visualization of like exactly like what's happening with your product and how people are buying it. And so ultimately, that's how I see. I know it's kind of a long-winded answer there, Greg, but I think that's how I see multi-touch attribution.
Yeah, no, that's I think that's a great overview. And so to kind of take that a step further, when marketers have that, when they have a view on multi-touch, and can really start benefiting from it, like what are some of the things that can more easily be accomplished? I know you kind of touched on some, but what can marketers look forward to once they kind of get past that hurdle of figuring out where their dollar, how effectively their dollars are being spent, and tactics being performed and everything like that?
Yeah, so I think that there's a couple of use cases that actually help with that. One is like, the first one, and I touched on this in my earlier podcast, which is basically, I think, budgeting. I think that that's a big one. Like most, when you're trying to understand exactly, like you're going into 2022 and you're trying to formulate a strategy going into it, having an understanding of like what's working, what's not working, and what your spend is, and where you could double down and generate more opportunities. Because ultimately, and it doesn't, and again, Greg, I also want to just kind of point out that this also works in the outbound world too, by the way. So it's not just where you're doing paid campaigns and content pieces, but also in the outbound world, where I believe that outbound is in a lot of ways is another piece of your marketing mix as well. So you have outbound SDRs, BDRs, whatever it may be, that are doing outreach, and you may be supporting them with air cover through ABM campaigns, account-based marketing campaigns, that are helping them achieve their goals. But they're reaching out through marketing email sequences and stuff like that. And so So they go through that entire process to really kind of generate opportunities through that, through that entire area. So when you're designing a budget, you're kind of, what you're doing is you're getting the whole understanding of like what's happening in the world, how people are coming in, how they're getting to know your product, how are they making a decision with your product, and then why are they buying your product, and all of those touch points, that multi-touch that we just discussed earlier, all of that kind of comes into how you're going to budget out the year. So like if when you're slicing up your budget and you're slicing up like your understanding of like the different mediums or sources that you're going to be using, and you're budgeting out the year, you want to see like, hey, if we're getting X number of demand gen leads or opportunities, our conversion rate is X to that point, so that we're giving now demo or a free trial, and then the sales rep takes it over. And this is more of a B2B side of things, but that sales rep takes over that, and they create a quality opportunity for that sales rep, and then the sales rep closes that deal, and then all of a sudden then there's revenue that comes in, and you can attribute all of those to those different touch points through attribution. So all of a sudden now you're able to say, okay, well, this is what we're spending on it, and here's what our results are. And so now this is like when you're building out a complete budget going into the year, you're able to say like, and be more predictive in your assessment on saying like, okay, yeah, we're going to spend this number of dollars, but we're expecting to get this X number of revenue. So out of this, or this number of leads, and generate opportunities and sales, and and on and on. But that's how budgeting. But when we do that, it looks great at the beginning of the year in January, right? You're like, yes, I have a really strong budget. We're going to go full force at this. And we do, and we put it out there. But then halfway through the year or a quarter into it,
The reality is striking. While we can stream movies on demand and order anything to our doorstep within a click, healthcare interactions often feel needlessly complex. Healthcare marketers, this one's for you. In Shop, Stream, Heal, author Adeline Ashley shares actionable insights from industry leaders like Netflix, Amazon, and Delta, showing how healthcare can thoughtfully adapt their winning strategies. This isn't about technology for technology's sake. It's about making healthcare more accessible, intuitive, and human. Drawing from real-world successes and lessons learned, the book shows you how to create healthcare experiences that truly meet patient needs while preserving clinical excellence. Shop, Stream, Heal by Adeline Ashley features a foreword from Dave Flanagan, CEO of Sitecore. It's published by the Agile brand and now available in print and digital formats on Amazon. Go to shopstreamheal.com for more information.
Market shifts, things happen, there's different things that affect whether people are buying or not buying, all of that. So you're constantly optimizing that budget throughout the year too. And so that's where the reporting allows you to like be more understand exactly like what's actually happening in your world. And so maybe something that was working 6 months ago or a year ago isn't necessarily working today. So maybe you have to pull back on that, and it allows you to actually be a little bit more strategic in those areas too. And so every quarter, as you're adjusting your budget, you can be a little bit smarter on how you do that. So, so that's one area. The other is the traditional side of things, like you said, like where the multi-touch, understanding exactly like where you can grow the fastest and how you can be a little bit more nimble and optimize your campaigns and your content and your email marketing. All of that allows you, through the attribution platform, allows you to get better visualization and model out the more successful paths of the customer journey. And then the third piece, which I think is just as important as anything else, is the experimental side of things with the platform. And so it allowing you to then experiment with different campaigns and different marketing mixes that you think are kind of important. The cool thing about attribution is it allows you to like really kind of formulate and understand exactly like what is working and what's not. So if you have a new marketing piece that you're like, yeah, you know what, we want to try this and see exactly like we think we're going to get X number, or it's going to be a top of funnel type of play, and all of a sudden you do the you put it in and you start to you filter it out or you segment it out. And then all of a sudden you start to watch it, and all of a sudden it's like not what you were thinking it. Yeah. Maybe it was successful, but it was more of a middle of the funnel type of marketing piece that you put out there, and all of a sudden your numbers are showing like, hey, it is successful and the conversion rates are great, but it's not an awareness play that we thought it was going to be, or it's not a branding play, or so it
Yeah.
allows you to be a little bit smarter on your experimentation side of things. And then if it is working for you, then you can add it to your marketing mix. If it's not, then you can toss it out. And so it allows you to be, I think, a little bit better in those areas, and then you can grow much faster adding those pieces in if it is working for you.
So one last question before we wrap up. Do you have any customer examples or examples of this of multi-touch in practice?
Yeah, Greg, great question. I think that I just literally just got off the call with a Zoom call with a customer right before this podcast, and they're a small company. They're an e-com site generating, and they're growing though, and they're generating a decent amount of revenue, but they're in their early stages as an organization. And so they started using attribution. And one of the great things about it was it allowed them to really kind of understand like what their ad spend was actually happening. So they had a couple ad platforms that they were running on, and they started to notice like, hey, look, we're spending a lot more money in this one ad platform, and it wasn't really generating a lot of revenue. It was generating like a lot of uh, um, visits, but the conversions were smaller, and the revenue wasn't matching up to the what they were actually spending. So one of the things that they were saying was like, hey, we're going to pull back, we're going to experiment and pull back and see if like that will affect our overall strategy, because they were getting a lot in this other platform, this other ad platform. They were getting a ton of opportunities and some decent ad spend, but they were also getting a ton through their organic traffic too. And so it allowed them to, one of the cool things was it allowed them in the organic side of things be able to go and see what the referring domains were and actually model out or audit the customer journeys to see exactly like what was working and what wasn't. But it also allowed them to pull back on the spend of the ad platform that they thought was really working, or thought was working
Yeah.
really well, and actually put it. And now what they're going to do is they're going to re-examine that entire process and say, you know what, we still want to try the ad platform. We're not pulling back 100%, but we're going to pull back on some of the campaigns we were doing, and we're going to see if that will actually help us, like, take those dollars and put them into better use, whether it's designing more organic traffic or organic content, or putting it into the other ad platform that is actually working for them. So
That's
to
great.
me, that's a success story, because that they saw the value in it. And one of the cool things was they were like, they basically were like, yeah, this is really great, and this is like exactly why we wanted to have an attribution, or bring in an attribution reporting platform, because it's guiding them along the way. So it's not everything and all to them, but it's helping them make better informed decisions, and this is directly from the owner of the organization. And so
Yeah.
to me, that's a huge success story. Now we also have not only um, startup type organizations, e-com sites, but we also have very large enterprise organizations using us as well. So we're very fortunate there, and it's on both the B2C and B2B side. So there's, again, on both sides of those equations, there's different goals and different journeys and paths and all that stuff. And so the DNA, in my opinion, for those different organizations is all different. And so and I see this even if you're you're in the same industry, you'll see like different journeys and customer paths that there, in a lot of ways you can kind of take the same strategies and tactics from a marketing perspective, but the journeys, there's still a lot of heavy details that go into those journeys, and understanding exactly what those paths look like so that you can replicate it, that they're all a little bit different. That's why I call it DNA. It's the DNA of the customer journey, right? Because
Yeah. Yeah.
it's all a little bit different. They're all snowflakes in a lot of ways. And so that's why you want to have a platform like Attribution to really kind of hone in on that, and then at the same time be able to model out those paths, and be able to be a little bit smarter and double down on areas that are working for you.
That's great. Well, David, thank you for joining the show. For those listening, what's the best way for them to keep up with what you and Attribution are doing?
Yeah, I mean, you can visit our website, attributionapp.com, and we're constantly putting out new blog posts and new content pieces. Or you can come in and ask for a demo, and we'll certainly demo one of our customer success engineers will demo the product for you and show you exactly how it works, and we'll certainly walk through like your use case and try to help you and design a nice analytics platform that works best for you and your organization.
Wonderful. Well, again, I'd like to thank David Hiltner, CEO of Attribution, for joining the show. Thanks for listening to The Agile Brand with Greg Kihlstrom in this special episode of the show brought to you by Attribution, an advanced multi-touch attribution company that empowers every marketer with the data to convert more buyers and maximize ROI. You can learn more about Attribution at www.attributionapp.com. See you next week. Thanks again for listening to the Agile Brand with Greg Kihlstrom podcast, brought to you by Tech Systems. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to subscribe on your podcast channel of choice and leave us a rating so that others can find the show more easily. You can access more episodes of the show at www.theagilebrand.show. To get a copy of my latest book, Meaningful Measurement of the Customer Experience, visit my website at gregkihlstrom.com. Until next week, stay agile.